gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's May the 3rd, 2023. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined earlier this morning by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, and the mustachioed one, Stephen Wagner, as we discuss the news of the day. And guys, I thought I'd start this morning with the transfer portal. I mean, that's on the forefront of everybody's mind, and things obviously starting to take shape with the Jaden Davis commitment. The cornerback from Oklahoma. Nice pickup, adds some depth to Miami's cornerback position, and which is never a bad thing, especially at that spot with the way teams play offense these days. But there's some weekend or late weekend visitors that are starting to take form a little bit here that, I thought we would start the conversation with today. Are they good enough? Do they make this football team better? And we can dive into that a little bit right now. So let's start with Kelvie Rose. He's a Louisiana Tech senior defensive tackle, also being recruited by Missouri, Ole Miss, Virginia Tech, Arkansas. Matt, your thoughts just on, Miami needs defensive tackle help. There's no question about it. Is this guy better than Jared Harrison Hunt, for example? Is he better than Jacob Lichtenstein, for example? Does a guy like Kelvie Rose coming from Louisiana Tech make the Hurricanes better at that position?
Here's what I don't understand. Forget your question.
Alonzo
Highsmith is supposed to be the guy.
Well,
ask him.
Obviously signing off.
Why are you asking me? Alonzo Highsmith apparently said
yes.
Not
coming on this show to talk about this.
Who's
stuff?
Matt Shodell to argue with Alonzo Highsmith's genius? But Gary, I emailed you this morning, and I pointed out that 5 guys that returned from last year that I thought were wasted spots that should have gone to either recruits in this year's class or last year's class, just because they're going to be backups. Probably Jonathan Dennis, Darryl Porter, Sagapolu, Jacob Lichtenstein, and Frank Ladson. I don't love that you take guys out of the portal that just have a couple of years and you're not going to develop into future stars. They're not freshmen who'll be here 4 or 5 years. They're guys who take up spots, and those guys as backups don't do anything for me. And now you ask
Porter
me.
might start, in fairness.
Who?
And Porter. And
Porter's going to start. Why'd they take Jaden Davis? Because Porter was the second best cornerback on the roster this spring behind Devontae Brown.
Yeah.
And they got a returning starter they like at nickel. So this is basically saying we still think Darryl Porter's not good enough. Because that's what they said last year when he came from West Virginia where he started. They said, you're not good enough. They barely played him. And when they played him, he was bad.
That's fair.
Anyway, so now you're asking me, are these guys good? I mean, look, Miami whiffed on more than half of their portal people they took last year. And to me, somebody asked on the board yesterday, what do you think of the 9 guys they took so far? And I said, I like 3 of them. And that's the truth. I like Javion Cohen, I like Matt Lee, and I like Francisco Mauigoa. The other 6, I think we're going to be talking a year from now saying, what the heck? Why these guys are backups that are taking up scholarship spots that could have gone to freshmen? Because there's, I think, 8 or 9 graduating seniors this year. You have a few of these guys are going to be back a year from now. That limits your options. And Gary, you said to me incorrectly, well, they could just transfer again. Yeah, they can transfer again. But what school is going to take a guy who has to sit out a year? And that's the rule. You get 1 free transfer, means you can play right away.
Unless the NCAA says you don't have to sit out a year.
Oh, yeah, because they love to say that. They're trying to crack down.
There's a lot of gray area there.
They're trying to crack down on that big time. So it's hard to jettison guys that you missed on. We talked about, well, why didn't they flush their roster out? Guys like Sagapolu and Dennis, to me, you can't get rid of them because it's not right. It's like you begged them to come here. A year later, you say, sorry, we need your roster spot, and no one's going to take you because you have to sit out a year. Goodbye. Go start working at, wherever Steven shops. Where do you start? I assume Ross Clothing, from what I can tell from what Steven wears.
TJ Maxx, actually.
TJ Maxx. And that's a big step up. So
you want me to show you my membership card?
This is why you can't miss. You can't miss in the portal. That's why I say take free agents. don't take portal guys. And they're taking everybody I've seen so far is a portal guy. Xavier Henderson is like a borderline portal guy, maybe a free agent. He's like a hybrid, just like the hybrid air raid Gary keeps talking about with Shannon Dawson. He's a hybrid.
Man, I'm gonna come clean here. This whole debate is putting me in a little bit of a compromised situation because I like the concept of the transfer portal, but I like it when you're getting Francisco Mayagoa. I'm with you, Matt. I don't like when you're getting depth fillers that are going to be third team. In the fall, like to me, that's not efficient use of the transfer portal. And so if the argument is Miami has to make these spots count a little bit better, I would agree with that. But, I think Jaden Davis makes the team better. I'm in favor of that pickup.
Jaden Davis, I don't want to hammer on the guy, but I think over the last 3 years, I sent you the stats, Gary. What was it? He gave up 1,200 passing yards.
Yeah, his Pro Football Focus and stats aren't great, but from people I've spoken to, he's a decent player. So we'll see.
He's got look. He's
I've never studied him. So
he's like a lot of guys at Miami, right? 4-star, highly rated, has all the skills in the world, but you put him on a field and he just doesn't really respond like in the games. I don't know that that'll change at Miami. Like I'm a big believer in when you see something over and over and over again. You can't expect it to change just because you're on a different team for a few months. He's getting here, in May or June. He'll have 2 or 3 months under a new coaching staff. You don't magically transform habits in 2 or 3 months before a season. Like, that's not how this works. And it's not ideal. And now they're getting guys. Look, the guys visiting this weekend so far from Louisiana Tech, Ferris State, North Texas, and Coffeyville Community College. Not to say any of those programs are not amazing programs that could beat Miami last year because they probably could have. But these aren't guys. These are guys who excelled at a totally different level and against totally different opponents. And it's almost like taking a high school player and putting them at this level because that's how different the level of play is. I mean, they're better than high school level, but if you understand what I'm saying, it's a different speed, a different strength, a different size they have to adjust to. Can they adjust to it? You don't know. That automatically, to me, makes them portal guys. If you're not a receiver running a 4.3 who can jump 37 inches and had 1,500 yards, like there are some guys like that are D2 guys. Aside from that, I'm not. If your measurements aren't like off the chart NFL measurements, and you just have really good stats from programs like North Texas, like that's not for me, man.
Yeah, and listen, I'm the first to admit, like I said, I'm a portal guy, but I'm a portal guy to get Matt Lee, who I saw this spring is going to have a massive impact on this football team. I'm a portal guy for a Javion Cohen, who is a first-team level Alabama offensive lineman that is going to have a massive impact on this team this fall. I'm a portal guy for Francisco Mayagoa, who I watched fly around the field the entire spring, who is going to be a great asset for this defense. I'm even a portal guy for Jaden Davis. But as Matt says, you've got 5 other guys that you could debate all day, and we're not going to do it right now, but you could certainly have debates on those other 5 guys. And then you've got a new crop coming onto the board here that are going to be visiting and going to be under consideration. And it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. And we're going to have to, dive a little bit deeper into them. And we'll talk a little bit more about these guys that are on the horizon on this show this morning. But first I want to bring in Steven.
Before you move on, because
wait, Matt. Let Steven get a word in here.
Well, only because you mentioned Jaden Davis.
Patiently waiting. He woke up at the crack of the morning here.
It'll take 1 minute.
He hasn't even rubbed the sleep out of his eyes yet, and you won't let him get a word in.
I don't care. I was hired before Stephen Wagner. I get to talk before Stephen Wagner.
You were hired before I was born. All right, at some point we gotta take a break.
Isn't that crazy? That what? That is true, and that is crazy.
Just stop bringing up Jaden Davis. The guy in 4 years at Oklahoma has given up 11 touchdown passes with 1 interception, and he's given up 1,146 yards with a 60% reception completion percentage at Oklahoma, okay? I don't need to continue to talk about how Jaden Davis is an amazing player. I'm happy they took him because Gary Ferman's happy, but I don't see him as a free agent right now. I'm sorry.
But you realize you're crushing your own Darryl Porter argument because if Jaden Davis isn't good enough, Darryl Porter probably starts. And now he comes off that list that you emailed me at 4:00 in the morning when you woke up to start preparing for this show.
If he's good, he comes off the list, but I don't know that he's going to be good. They may wind up having to start somebody else. I think Chris Graves is the sleeper in all this. I'm not even kidding. Chris Graves was still a little like limited this spring coming off that injury last year. I think he might start this year. Like, I'm not kidding. I think he has the best cover skills of anybody out of that cornerback group. And, to be determined. But I think Devontae Brown and Chris Graves, that's my pick as your sleeper starters at cornerback, no matter who else they want to take out of the portal, unless it's a free agent. Now, Stephen Wagner.
All right, Stephen, listen.
Stephen Wagner, I want to hear more about your birth date. What year were you born?
You bring a little bit of a different perspective to this because you've only been with us for like what 6 months, 7 months, something like that. Maybe a little, maybe yes, like six months or so.
I think it's actually, I think we just hit 6 months.
I think we just hit 6 months. Yeah. So, but you're bringing like a little bit of a different perspective into this because you don't have the history that Matt and I have in terms of all the transfers that have been coming into Miami for these last several years. Is this, in your eyes, doing a phenomenal job? And Matt pointed out they have Alonzo in the building. Alonzo is looking at all these kids very closely. He is obviously probably signing off on the pursuit of all these kids now, not the ones that have failed in the past. I'm talking about now because he is firmly entrenched there in the football offices. He came in late last year. They were getting ready for the season. A lot was flying. I'm not sure he had the impact last year that maybe would have been desirable, but I think he does have the impact now, and he is evaluating these kids. And if they're going after them, I'm going to make the assumption that Alonzo has endorsed it and they're decent players. So when you're going after a defensive lineman from Louisiana Tech, Stephen, when you're going after a linebacker from Ferris State, a linebacker from North Texas, is that phenomenal scouting on Miami's part? Is that the benefits of having a 20-plus year pro football scouting eye of an Alonzo Highsmith on your staff? Or is that a statement that this program, as it prepares to go into year 2 of Mario, a season coming off a 5-win campaign, is the program still in a little bit of a tough spot where it's feeling a little bit desperate to upgrade the roster?
I'm going to say something that's going to appease both of you here. Gary, yes, if Miami is offering any of these transfer kids, they're not bad. Like, no one who gets an offer to Miami sucks at football, straight up. They might not all be first-team ACC guys. They might not all be NFL talents, but none of them suck at football. And every single one of them is being signed off on by Mario Cristobal and Alonzo Highsmith. I do think that some of what's happening is that as Miami is going back into the portal, they're realizing, hey, the portal in general right now is not extremely deep. There is not this overwhelming amalgam of talent just sitting there in the portal waiting to be plucked like there was whenever we first were introduced to the concept of a transfer portal. This is kind of just the best that's available right now. So I'm not going to say this is phenomenal scouting because, quite frankly, I don't necessarily think it is. I think this is just looking into the portal and saying, hey, I think this is probably best available option. We probably need to go ahead and offer this guy. And, I'm sure Miami, does their due diligence, and I'm sure that they're not offering kids without scouting them and without reviewing their film and everything. But I think that there is a little bit of pressure on Miami at some of these positions, like say defensive tackle, to go in and look and say, hey, straight up, where we were last year and where we were in the spring and how we did in the high school recruiting cycle, only signing one defensive tackle, it just wasn't up to snuff. And we need something. And so I think that there's a little bit of urgency there in Miami, kind of feeling like they have to go out there and take a defensive tackle, take a linebacker, take a corner, take whatever position you may think of. I mean, heck, I wouldn't be surprised if something pretty similar happens at receiver at some point too. But I don't think that adding a rotational defensive lineman is going to be the type of addition that's going to get Miami the gains that you want to see. I mean, whenever we talk about all these championship winning teams, whenever we talk about these really good teams, yeah, we talk about their depth, but no one is saying, man, that second string rotational tackle that came in on third downs sure was the reason why we won these games. They're not saying, hey, this corner who would come in some of these quarter and dime packages to cover the slot, man, we couldn't have won that. We couldn't have won that without him. And the fact of the matter is, defensively, you probably need one lockdown corner. You need one game-wrecking interior defensive lineman. And after that, quite frankly, once we get into looking at a team's actual depth, I mean, yeah, it's nice to have, but that's it. It's really a luxury. It's not something that you're going to constantly be leaning on. Yeah, depth is fantastic to have, but if you don't have one guy who can go out there and stop a T. Higgins type guy at Clemson, well, then it's really not worth very much then, is it? Like we can brag about, well, they've got these three corners, they've got these three linemen who are all really competitive with each other. You can plug them in at any time and they're all going to perform about the same. Well, yeah, that's great. But where's the one guy who's going to come in and be a game wrecker? Who's the one guy who's going to step in and single-handedly say, don't worry, don't worry, defense, don't worry, offense. I've got this. I'm going to be able to make that play.
All right. So, this is something that we're going to be talking about for several days. We're going to see which of these guys actually ends up committing to Miami and coming to be a part of this team. And then we will dive into them even harder. But just to bring you up to speed, and there's stories on the website on all this stuff. You got the Louisiana Tech defensive tackle, Kelvin Rose. He's going to visit Miami this weekend. We've also confirmed that a pair of linebacker transfers are going to be visiting. You got Division II Ferris State linebacker Connor Neer. He's going to be at Miami on Thursday and Friday. North Texas linebacker Larry Nixon is going to be on campus this weekend. And then there's a JUCO interior lineman by the name of Amari Wiggins, who is also setting up a Hurricanes visit for this weekend based on what we know right now. So all this is going to take shape through these visits this weekend. Certainly by the early next week, we're going to know who's coming, who's not coming. You still got the receivers that are in play. Henderson, for example, although Miami's been starting to fish around with other guys this week. And that's a sign, I think, that they think Xavier Henderson may not come to Miami. So contingency plans are being laid there. But this is all stuff that is going to be active in the next several days. And we promise you that we will be all over every aspect of that as it progresses forward. Okay, we other stuff that's on the website today. We have a post-spring ranking of the top 10 players on Miami's offense, and with an explanation of why each player made the list. Matt, that was your baby. I'll throw it back to you. Your thoughts after breaking down these top 10 players on offense and just where the Miami offense is in general coming out of spring practice and going into off-season workouts and then eventually into fall camp.
Well, on offense, I think it's a good thing that we didn't go to do a top 15 because I think there's enough top-end talent on offense for sure that the team can be really good, but that's if nobody gets injured. Last year, there was a lot of injuries, and as bad as that offensive system was, that didn't do this team any favors. When you get down past really number 12 and number 11 and 12 in my mind, we did the top 10, but number 11 and 12 are both true freshmen, which tells you the state of things in this offensive program in general. I would have Francis Mavigo and Ray Joseph right there. And even the guys that are 9 and 10, like not to give it away, but I'm going to give it away. Jacoby George and Cam McCormick. Jacoby George has never done anything here. He just happens to look really, really good and was the first teamer all spring. And Cam McCormick was the first teamer ahead of Jaleel Skinner and, looked really good as a blocking tight end and has that physicality you really want. So it's just there's not a lot of quality depth on offense. You're going to see the same thing on defense when we do that. You've got, 8 to maybe 10 guys on both sides of the ball that are good, you know. And then after that, you just got a bunch of guys where you just don't know what you're going to get. There's consistency issues. There's just playmaking ability issues. So, you know, a lot of this, you know, people want to say, oh, the team has to win 8 or 9 games this year. Well, if they're going to have a good year, nobody ever talks about injuries. But honestly, this is a team that cannot afford injuries on either side of the ball to their starters, because there's very little depth that I see when I break down these top 10 guys and look who else could be in the top 10. There's not a lot that are outside the top 10 pushing to be in the top 10 right now. So barring some guys just all of a sudden looking like Superman in the fall, you know, you have what you have and you have to deal with it, which is why, like Stephen alluded to, I mean, he didn't say the word panic, but you almost see this panic in the portal where we need depth, we need guys, and they don't care who they're taking because, like Stephen said, this is what's in the portal. That's all you can work with. It's not what Miami wants. I think, you know, I talked to Miami people who had thought there were going to be these big names coming out in the second portal window, which was the final portal window. And it didn't really transpire that way. There were a few, but even the middling guys are commanding these huge NIL deals because there's just not a lot that came out from the portal. People were able to keep their top guys home with their own deals that they were able to put in place. And agents were smart enough to realize, hey, my God, it's not to go in the portal. I could get backroom deals and figure out what's going on and go from there. So it's just not an ideal situation for Miami right now with their depth and with the way the portal is right now.
All right, so we've got that story on the website this morning, and then later in the day, we're actually going to bring out the top 10 players on defense. So you'll have that to look forward to as the day goes forward. And these are just fun stories that we're doing right now. It's the off season. We're breaking the team down every which way we can, and just to give you guys a little bit more insight into what's going on and maybe what your expectations for the fall should be. So I hope you're enjoying a lot of these analysis pieces that we're doing and we'll continue to be doing. And so the top 10 players on offense and then the top 10 players on defense is a focal point for us right now. All right, let's turn our attention now to traditional recruiting. And Jason Taylor and Lance Guidry were in the Chicago area Monday afternoon to check up on 2024 5-star defensive lineman Justin Scott. He's the number 11 overall recruit in the On3 rankings. And if you go by the predictions that are starting to filter into the recruiting prediction machine, and I got to get mine in there at some point as well, a lot of people, including myself, think that Miami's doing extremely well with Justin Scott. And Stephen, you had a chance to talk to St. Ignatius head coach Matt Miller after the visit of Jason Taylor and Lance Guidry to his school. And give us the little synopsis without totally ruining the scintillating excellence of the story that you put together for everybody of, you know, just how Miami's doing with this key defensive line recruit.
Well, if we're going to keep it short, and I'll say Miami is doing well. If we're going to go ahead and elaborate on that a little bit, Matt Miller told me that Justin Scott's high school coach told me that kind of whenever his recruitment really got started and whenever Miami really first started showing that interest, that he kind of thought, oh, well, you know, Miami, you know, they're more than 1,000 miles away. They're all the way down there in South Florida. You know, I don't know how much interest he might really have. You know, Notre Dame's a program that's just right there down the street. I think it's something like an hour and a half drive from Chicago or something like that. And then, of course, you've got Michigan right up the road in Ann Arbor too. But apparently that visit down to Coral Gables, which was effectively a week-long unofficial visit where Justin Scott just basically spent a week around Miami's coaching staff, that changed a lot. And now it's got Scott kind of looking at the Hurricanes a different way. And Jason Taylor and Lance Guidry, they wanted to make sure that Justin Scott is aware of just how much they value him, how good they feel about him, and how badly that they really want him. And obviously, there are a lot of programs that want him right now. I mean, you know, you think of every Power 5 program under the sun. Whenever I ask Matt Miller, you know, hey, so, you know, who's coming out here to visit? I mean, it'd probably be shorter to name the list of Power 5 schools that aren't going to try to recruit Justin Scott. So, you know, he is it's starting to look like he could have the chance to be to this year's class what Francis Malagoa was to last year's class. This really high-profile, elite lineman, Justin Scott obviously being on the defensive line, Malagoa being on the offensive line, but Miami really putting that value in the trenches and trying to build these teams front to back and trying to hopefully start with with the defensive lineman who could be kind of one of those really rare talents who is able to come in and potentially even play quickly as a true freshman. That's something that you really don't see a lot of at the defensive tackle position or on the offensive line, quite frankly, just because we've seen that the closer you are to the football, the further the further you're entrenched on either side of the football, the longer it's going to take for you to physically adjust to the level of play, to the level of physicality that's demanded at the college level. Justin Scott seems like he could be one of those guys, and Miami's making darn sure that he knows it.
All right. This is the May evaluation period where the coaches get to go out and watch spring practices and watch a lot of tape on players. It's really a very important part of recruiting that really many people don't take it as seriously as it deserves. And an example I'm going to give you is the travels of Shannon Dawson, Miami's offensive coordinator, who passed by Findlay, Ohio, to take a look at 2025 four-star quarterback Ryan Montgomery. Miami's on the short list for a visit by Montgomery. So, like I said, it's really important for Coach Dawson to get a real good feel for what they have there. And so he stopped by to watch Ryan work out. We've got a story on that on the website today. Obviously, Miami remains very active at IMG Academy, the home of four-star wide receiver Jure Hawkins. And he's right now he's the number 182 overall prospect in that 24 class, but he's getting heavy interest from not just from the Hurricanes, but from Penn State and Florida and others as well. He's looking to visit Miami. We update his status for you as well. And then, of course, there will be a constant continued flow of recruiting stories as the coaches make all these visits to schools all over the country. And you have that to look forward to here going forward today and then every day for the next several weeks. And so we'll be talking a lot about that as well. But that's going to do it for Good Morning CaneSport for today. We thank you so much for starting out your day with us. If you like this show, like our channel, hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube and basically increase the interest in these shows and our audiences, and we greatly appreciate that. And then, of course, if you are not yet a subscriber to our CaneSport.com website, please get on over, jump on board with us. Your subscriptions allow us to do what we do every single day, and we obviously appreciate you guys for that. So for Stephen Wagner, Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time, everybody.